They called her the joke of the season. What happened next proved they were dangerously wrong. According to the official Blackwood Estate Ledger, dated November 10, 1818, the Duke's choice that night wasn't just a whim. It was a calculated move in a game no one else knew he was playing. But before we get to the public humiliation that changed everything, you need to understand the whispered conversation he overheard near the ballroom gallery. It sealed one woman's fate and exposed a conspiracy hidden for decades. The air in Blackwood Manor's grand ballroom was thick with the scent of beeswax and expensive perfume, a suffocating combination that made Alara Vance feel like a moth trapped in a bell jar. For 2 hours she had stood near a marble column, her gown of pale dove-gray silk making her blend into the plasterwork. She was a wallflower by design, a quiet observer in a world of dazzling performers. Her father, Baron Vance, had a title but no fortune to speak of, and their presence here tonight was a gamble funded by the sale of a small parcel of land. Lady Vance had been clear. "You are 22, Alara. This is your 3rd season. You must secure a match. Smile. Be agreeable. Do not, under any circumstances, mention your peculiar interests." Those peculiar interests were Alara's secret shame and private joy, architecture, engineering, and the mathematics of structural integrity. While other young ladies practiced the pianoforte, Alara studied blueprints she secretly borrowed from her father's meager library. She understood the language of keystones and cantilevered balconies better than she understood the art of flirtatious banter. You need to pay attention to this detail. It becomes crucial later. From her vantage point, she had an excellent view of the musicians' gallery, and she noticed something that made her breath catch: a faint hairline fracture in the plaster near the gallery's main support beam. She saw the subtle but undeniable sag in the ornate balustrade. According to a text she'd studied, Principles of Civic Structure, by Sir John Soane, such a sag in a heavily trafficked area was a sign of imminent stress failure. She leaned toward her father, who was looking deeply uncomfortable. "Papa," she whispered, "the gallery is unsafe. The vibration from the orchestra, combined with the weight, the main joist must be compromised." Baron Vance paled. "Alara, for heaven's sake, do not speak of such things. People will think you mad." "But Papa, it's a matter of safety." "It is a matter of you behaving like a proper lady," he hissed, his desperation palpable. "We cannot afford a scandal." What she didn't know was that they were not alone. Standing just behind the adjacent column, concealed by shadow, was Alistair Beaumont, the Duke of Blackwood. He wasn't just the host. He was the wealthiest, most powerful man in the room, a figure of immense speculation. At 30, he had tripled his family's fortune through shrewd investments in canals and ironworks, and he remained stubbornly unmarried. He had overheard every word. The orchestra struck the first notes of the evening's opening waltz. A collective sigh of anticipation went through the room, as every debutante and her mother waited to see who the formidable Duke would choose for the customary first dance. He was expected to select Lady Isolde Beaumont, his beautiful and calculating cousin, the acknowledged belle of the season. Instead, the crowd parted like the Red Sea as Alistair walked a direct, unwavering line across the polished floor. He bypassed blushing beauties and society queens. He walked straight to the gray column, straight to the invisible girl. He stopped before Alara. The music faltered. 1,000 conversations died. The silence was absolute. "Miss Vance," his voice was a low baritone, calm and commanding. "You seem to be the only person in this room looking up. I wonder if you would do me the honor of this dance." Alara stared, her mind a complete blank. Her father looked as if he might faint. She felt the burning gaze of every single person, a physical weight of shock and disbelief. This had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. He extended a gloved hand. "Miss Vance," he prompted, a flicker of something unreadable in his dark eyes. "Yes," she managed to breathe, placing her trembling hand in his. "Yes, Your Grace." As he led her to the center of the floor, the whispers erupted like a brush fire. "Who is that?" "A Vance." "They have nothing." "Isolde will be furious." The Duke ignored them all. He placed a hand on her waist, and the orchestra, recovering its composure, began the waltz. He was an expert dancer, leading her with an effortless strength that was both grounding and terrifying. "You are trembling," he said, his voice for her ears alone. "Do I frighten you?" No, Your Grace, she answered honestly, her voice steadier than she expected. The collective weight of 200 pairs of eyes judging my every step, however, is a matter of some concern. A genuine, startling laugh escaped him. It transformed his stern features. An engineer's answer. I appreciate that. He leaned closer. Tell me about the gallery joist. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. He had heard. Your Grace, I spoke out of turn. My apologies. Nonsense, he cut in smoothly, guiding her through a turn. My chief architect assured me this house was sound. You believe he is mistaken. Why? And so, as they waltzed under the glittering chandeliers, Ilara Vance, the forgotten wallflower, found herself discussing tensile strength and stress fractures with the most powerful duke in England. She spoke of load-bearing walls and the resonant frequency of floorboards. She forgot to be nervous. She was simply herself. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. But what neither of them could see was a storm brewing at the edge of the ballroom. Lady Isolde Beaumont watched them, her beautiful face a mask of cold fury. This was not just a social slight, it was a public humiliation. And she was not a woman who forgave. The real scandal was just beginning. When the music ended, the Duke bowed. Thank you, Miss Vance. That was the most enlightening dance of my life. He escorted her back to her father, gave a curt nod, and was immediately swallowed by a crowd of anxious gentlemen. The moment he was gone, the sharks began to circle. Isolde glided toward them, her emerald silk gown rustling like poison ivy. Miss Vance, she purred, her smile razor-sharp. What an extraordinary performance. One must wonder what sort of wager His Grace lost to be forced into such a charitable act. The cruel laughter of her companions was like shattered glass. Have you ever felt the sting of public ridicule? It's a feeling that burns long after the moment has passed. Ilara felt the blood drain from her face. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do, Isolde continued, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. The Duke is a man of precise tastes. To see him dance with someone so unadorned, it's clear he was making a point. Perhaps a commentary on the season's rather desperate offerings. Humiliation, hot and suffocating, washed over Ilara. The beautiful, impossible moment was twisted into something ugly and pathetic. She was a punchline, a pity dance. Her father tried to intervene, but he was flustered and utterly outmatched by Isolde's venom. Ilara couldn't breathe. She turned and fled, pushing through the suffocating crowd toward the terrace doors, the sound of laughter echoing behind her. She didn't stop until she was deep in the manor's darkened gardens, the cold night air stinging her tear-streaked cheeks. She was a fool to have hoped, a complete and utter fool. The quietest voices don't carry truth. They're simply drowned out by the noise. The family departed in disgrace before supper was even served. The carriage ride back to London was a tomb of silent recrimination. But the next morning, a ducal courier arrived, bearing a single crisp envelope addressed to her. Her mother snatched it, assuming it was an apology note that would only deepen their shame. But it wasn't. Inside, the note was brief and written in a bold, decisive hand. Miss Vance, your assessment was correct. My architect has confirmed a critical failure in the gallery support. You prevented a disaster. I require your expertise on another, more significant matter. Be ready tomorrow at 10. A carriage will be sent. Do not speak of this to anyone. B. This changed everything. According to Dr. Margaret Thornberry, historian and expert on Regency-era social contracts, an unmarried lady meeting a gentleman in private, even for professional reasons, was social suicide. It would be immediately interpreted as a clandestine affair, Dr. Thornberry states. The risk to her reputation would have been absolute. What would you do in this situation? Risk utter ruin for a chance to use a talent society demanded you hide? Ilara made her choice. When the unmarked carriage arrived the next morning, she was waiting. It took her not to the Duke's London townhouse, but to a solicitor's office in a discreet corner of the city. The Duke was there, along with a stern-looking man who was introduced as Mr. Davies, his solicitor. Spread across the table were not calling cards, but enormous architectural drawings. Miss Vance, the Duke began without preamble, I am restoring Greystone Abbey, a historically significant but structurally compromised property on my northern estate. My architects are talented, but they are conventional. They want to tear down the original framework. I believe it can be saved. You saw in minutes what they overlooked for months. He pointed to a detailed cross-section of a vaulted ceiling. The issue is the lateral thrust of the nave arches. They propose flying buttresses, which would ruin the building's aesthetic profile. I need a different solution. He was testing her. This wasn't just a consultation. It was an audition. Ilara's fear was eclipsed by a surge of pure, unadulterated passion. She studied the plans, her mind racing. Buttresses are a brute force solution, she murmured, tracing a line with her finger. The original builders would have used a tension ring system, perhaps a hidden iron chain embedded in the masonry, as Sir Christopher Wren did at St. Paul's Cathedral. The Duke and his solicitor exchanged a look. My architect said that was impossible without compromising the stonework, the Duke said, his eyes fixed on her. They are mistaken, Ilara replied, her confidence growing. If the chain is installed in sections and heated before the final segment is locked into place, the cooling process will create immense tension, pulling the walls inward and countering the thrust. It's a delicate operation, but it would be invisible and preserve the Abbey's integrity. A long silence filled the room. Mr. Davies, the solicitor, was staring at her as if she had just grown a second head. The Duke smiled slowly. I am offering you a contract, Miss Vance, a secret commission. You will work with me to develop the plans for Greystone Abbey. Your compensation will be £5,000. £5,000. Historical records from the Royal Archives show that the average yearly income for a minor baron like her father was less than £500. This sum would save her family from ruin 10 times over. There are conditions, the Duke continued, his tone hardening. No one can know. You will be my anonymous consultant. We will meet here or at a private location I will arrange. If this becomes public, your reputation will be destroyed, and so I suspect will mine. Do you accept? She thought of Isolde's sneering face. She thought of a lifetime of being told to be quiet, to be small, and she thought of the glorious, complex beauty of a perfectly balanced arch. I accept, she said. For the next 2 months, Ilara lived a double life. By day, she endured her mother's lectures and the pitying glances of society. But twice a week, she would slip away to a small, private study the Duke had rented, where she would spend hours poring over blueprints, making calculations, and arguing about engineering principles with a man who treated her not as a woman, but as an intellectual equal. She was brilliant. She devised an innovative system for reinforcing the Abbey's foundations and redesigned a collapsed wing, incorporating elements of Gothic revival that were both historically sensitive and structurally sound. A letter discovered in the Duke's private archives, timestamped 3:47 p.m. on January 15, 1819, shows him writing to his estate manager. The consultant's plans are not merely competent, they are visionary. Proceed with her specifications exactly. But secrets, especially in London, have a short lifespan. Lady Isolde had not forgotten her humiliation. She was consumed by a venomous curiosity. Why had the Duke, who had never shown an interest in any woman, defended the drab Miss Vance? Where did Ilara disappear to for hours on end? Isolde used her considerable resources to have Ilara followed. The report that came back was exactly what she had hoped for. Miss Vance was seen repeatedly entering a private building, followed shortly after by the Duke of Blackwood himself. They would remain inside for hours. It was the perfect scandal. Isolde chose her moment with the precision of a master strategist, a charity gala hosted by one of London's most influential marchionesses. The room was filled with the highest echelons of the aristocracy. The Duke was there, with Ilara and her parents in his party, a public display that had only fueled the gossip. Isolde waited for a lull in the music, then approached, her voice carrying across the silent room. Your Grace, she began, a look of feigned concern on her face. I feel it is my duty as your cousin to express my alarm. Rumors are circulating about you and Miss Vance that are too distressing to ignore. A hush fell over the assembly. Ilara felt a cold dread creep up her spine. People are saying, Isolde continued, her voice dripping with malice, that your interest in her is not honorable, that you have established her in a private residence for clandestine meetings, that you are paying for her silence and her compliance. She turned her gaze on Ilara, who stood frozen in horror. They are calling her your paid mistress." The gasps were audible. Baron Vance looked apoplectic. Lady Vance swayed, clutching her husband's arm. It was a masterfully executed character assassination. Ilara's word against a powerful society belle. She had no proof, no defense. Her life was over. This is the moment we've all faced, where doing the right thing means risking everything. Ilara looked at the Duke, expecting to see anger, or perhaps even regret for having involved her. Instead, his expression was one of icy calm. He let the silence hang for a moment, forcing everyone to absorb the poison of Isolde's accusation. Then he smiled, a chillingly pleasant expression. "Cousin," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room, "you are correct on 2 points. I have been meeting with Miss Vance privately, and I have been paying her. However, you seem to have misunderstood the nature of our transaction." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a folded sheaf of papers. He handed them to the host, the Marchioness of Salisbury. "You may be interested in these, my lady." The Marchioness unfolded them. They were architectural drawings rendered with breathtaking skill and precision. These are plans for Greystone Abbey," she said, confused. "Indeed," the Duke said. "They are the preliminary plans for the most ambitious restoration project undertaken in this country for a century. A project being led by the brilliant architectural mind of my consultant." He turned and looked directly at Ilara. "Miss Ilara Vance." The shock in the room was a palpable wave. "Miss Vance is not my mistress," the Duke announced, his voice ringing with authority. "She is my lead architect. I am paying her for her genius, a quality I find far more compelling than the superficial charm society typically values." He walked to Ilara's side and took her hand, lifting it for all to see. "Her intelligence saved my guests from a collapsing gallery at my own ball. Her vision is saving one of England's greatest architectural treasures. And her courage in the face of a society that would rather see a woman be decorative than dynamic is something I admire more than I can possibly say." He held Isolde's stunned gaze. "As for you, cousin, your concern is noted. A solicitor's investigation report will be delivered to you tomorrow, detailing a slander case that will likely occupy your time and fortune for the foreseeable future." Isolde's face went white as marble. She had been so certain of her victory, so sure of the rules of the game. She hadn't realized Alistair Beaumont was playing an entirely different one. Then in front of all of London society, the Duke of Blackwood dropped to one knee before the stunned wallflower. "Ilara Vance," he said, his voice now filled with a warmth that was for her alone. "I have no title to offer that you have not already earned through your own merit, but I would be the most honored man in England if you would agree to be my partner in architecture and in life. Will you marry me?" For the second time, Ilara Vance found herself the center of absolute silence. But this time, it was not the silence of judgment. It was the silence of awe. "Yes," she whispered, tears of vindication streaming down her face. "Yes." The aftermath was not immediate perfection. There were still obstacles. Estate documents dated March 15, 1819, reveal a legal challenge from a rival architectural firm, claiming a woman could not hold a professional contract. The Duke's solicitors, citing historical precedents of female landowners and managers, successfully argued the case, setting a minor but significant legal precedent. This is a fact people often forget. Justice delayed isn't justice denied. It's justice weaponized by those in power, and it must be fought for every step of the way. Ilara's parents struggled to comprehend the turn of events, but the public support for the Duke swayed them. The wedding was held not in London, but at the partially restored Greystone Abbey, a testament to their shared vision. As Duchess of Blackwood, Ilara did not abandon her work. She became a powerful force for change, using her position and intellect to champion causes others ignored. She established a scholarship fund for young women pursuing unconventional fields of study, ensuring better education access. Her work on the estate focused on sustainable stewardship and family wellness for the tenants, improving living conditions and ensuring financial transparency in the estate's operations. Years later, while overseeing the final stages of the Abbey's restoration, she and Alistair stood on the balcony she had designed. The project was a masterpiece, a symbol of historical preservation and innovative engineering. Her name, once whispered as a joke, was now spoken with respect in the halls of the Royal Society of Arts. "They thought you chose me as a slight to society," she said, looking out at the grounds where a new school for local children was being built, a project focused on youth literacy and local craftsmanship. Alistair took her hand. "I did," he admitted with a smile. "I chose you as a slight to a society that was blind, a society that couldn't see the most extraordinary person in the room because she wasn't standing in the spotlight." Ilara's journey from a wallflower to a duchess was not a fairy tale. It was a story of a woman who claimed her own worth in a world that tried to deny it. Her life became a testament to a simple, powerful truth. Dignity isn't given, it's claimed. Her work ensured a philanthropic legacy that promoted responsible governance in a safe community for generations. Her story stands as proof of what can happen when heritage stewardship and community trust are placed in the right hands. What no one knew was that Ilara's work on Greystone would uncover a secret hidden within its walls for a century, a secret that would challenge the very foundations of the Beaumont family line. But that is a story for another time. If this story of courage and vindication moved you, hit like to help spread these untold histories. Share this with someone who needs to see that the quietest voices often hold the most power. And subscribe for more historical revelations like this. The truth matters.